right, welcome everyone for coming out. Thanks for coming out to the candidate forum for 93rd District State Representative. The Register-Mail and Sandburg College have collaborated on this event tonight. I'm Tom Martin, editor of the Register-Mail. And I will be moderating, but I won't. I've got a few words here at the beginning, and then we're going to turn it over to our panelists and our candidates. We're live streaming this event on the Register-Mail's Facebook page. We'll also make that available on galesburg.com. And we'd like to thank WGIL for a live broadcast as well. So we've got Will Stevenson right over here. This is where Will's supposed to dance, but I see that he's not going to, so we'll just move along. And you can see from the map, we're not standing in District 93 right now. It covers the southern portion of Galesburg, then stretches south across parts or all of 8 counties down to Brown and Cass counties. So it's a pretty big district. Tonight we have a panel asking questions. We have Rebecca Sismarski, government reporter for the Register-Mail. Robert Connolly, we pulled him off the crime beat to cover this, and it is Illinois politics, by the way. So, and then we have Robert Wolford, who is a Sandburg College student and also represents the students on the Board of Education for Sandburg. The questions that you're going to be hearing tonight were developed with the Register-Mail reporters and with Professor Laura Romer's political science class. So we've got quite a combination of questions for you. The candidates tonight are the incumbent, a Republican, Noreen Hammond of Macomb, and challenger, a Democrat, John Curtis, also of Macomb. Hammond has served as state representative since December 2010. This is Curtis's second run for this seat. With that, I think we're going to move on to opening statements. And let's start with you, Noreen Hammond. You have 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you this evening. Thank you to Sandburg College and to the Register-Mail for making this happen and making it possible. I am State Representative Noreen Hammond. I represent the 93rd District in the Illinois House, and as was mentioned, it includes all or part of 8 counties, one of the largest geographic districts in the Illinois House. I have been married to my husband Leonard, and we will celebrate our 40th anniversary in November. We have one daughter, Trish, 36 years old. Needless to say, the love of our lives. I am the Assistant House Minority Leader, and I serve as the minority spokesperson for the House Higher Education Committee and the Consumer Protection Committee. I also serve on appropriations, higher education, insurance, transportation, roads and bridges, and human services. In addition, I am on the board for the State Ag and Rural Leaders. It is a group that encompasses all 50 states and 8 Canadian provinces, discussing agriculture issues throughout the U.S. and Canada. I am also the Vice Chair on the Council of State Governments, Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. Thank you. Look forward to your questions.
John Curtis, your opening statements. And by the way, there's 2 minutes for every response here. We've got some timers here. Keith and Annie are helping us out, so they're letting the candidates know when they have 30 seconds left, 15 seconds, and then time's up. So, John, it's up to you.
Well, thanks so much for the opportunity to join you tonight. My name is John Curtis. I'm a farmer, teacher, and small business owner. For almost 20 years, I've run what is called a CSA, where I grow vegetables, herbs, flowers, and berries for my members who come to my farm and harvest. Most of that time, I've also been a teacher. I've taught junior high and high school. I've taught community colleges for Spoon River, Sandburg, and Blackhawk colleges. Most recently, I've taught education classes at Western Illinois University. I've been married to my wife and partner, Karen, for 24 years. We met as Peace Corps volunteers in the Dominican Republic. Karen works at the Illinois Institute for Rural Affairs and also teaches a class in the spring at Knox College. She would be here, but she is representing me at another candidate forum in Beardstown tonight. Karen and I have 3 kids, 1 dog, and 1 cat. For too long, we've watched career politicians bankrupt our state and do too little to improve our communities while getting pay raises and benefits for themselves. These career politicians weren't willing to make the politically tough choices when it mattered, so we went 2 years with no budget, further damaging our local economies and hurting our elderly, our children, and our most vulnerable people. I've watched my own friends, neighbors, and customers leave the area. We need change. I know the 93rd District. I've covered every bit that I can in my truck and on foot. I've seen the empty houses. I've learned about the teacher shortages and cuts to programs at our local schools. I've heard about healthcare issues that force people into bankruptcy. I've listened as people talk about high taxes, poor services, and the lack of trust in Illinois state government to make things better. We cannot afford more of the same. We need new people, new ideas, and new ways of doing things.
Okay, thank you. So the first round of questions are going to be about state finance. Rebecca Smarsky, we're going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tom. The first question is, how did Illinois get into this financial mess? And Mr. Curtis, we're going to start with you.
Very poor planning and not putting money that we should have been putting into programs. The mess that we are in has been building for decades, and it's something that's going to take a long time to get out of. A couple years ago, we experienced 2 years without a budget. Representative Hammond would have been the vote that would have overridden the governor's veto and would have allowed us to have a budget. And that took a bad situation and made it much, much worse. It's hard to talk about all the things that we've done wrong in Illinois. It's a long list. We need to turn it around. Our state constitution mandates that our budgets are balanced. Even this year's budget is not balanced. It is over $1 billion out of balance. We need balanced budgets, and we need to do a better job in Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. And Mrs. Hammond, your turn.
If we go back to the Edgar administration, when Governor Edgar left office, we had, if you will, a rainy day fund of about $250 million. Doesn't sound like a lot of money in today's economic times, but at that time it was significant. However, at the same time, we also had put into place a ramp for our pension payments. That was very lazy, if you will, in the very beginning, and then the trajectory towards those payments has gone up significantly to where we are today with looking at nearly an $8 billion payment, and that doesn't flatten out until we get to about $12 billion. So that certainly has been part of it. In addition, after Governor Edgar left office, programs were expanded and not funded properly. So year after year after year, you would see the need for a supplemental budget because the budget that was passed was not nearly adequate to fund the expansions and the growth of government that was there. So as we see ourselves today in the situation that we are, it's a culmination of not just 2 years, it's a culmination of decades that we were not responsible for balancing the budget properly, keeping in mind our pension payment.
Thank you, Mrs. Hammond.
Describe the type of pension reform you support, Mary Hammond.
So Over the last few years, there has been attempts at, if you will, at making changes to our pension system in the state of Illinois. Two significant bills that passed the General Assembly have proven in Supreme Court to be unconstitutional. So as we go forward, I think it's important that we keep in mind our Constitution is clear. The public benefit cannot be diminished. Is that open for translation? Maybe a little bit, but the courts have been very clear on that. And so this year, in this year's budget, there were some initiatives, one of which allows for individuals that are vested in the system, have 8 years, but not a 20-year term with the state, they can take a lump sum payment. So whatever their pension payment would be for that vested time, they can take that out at, I believe it's a 70% of what they would be allowed. The other part of that would allow for retirees, not past retirees, but current retirees, to take, instead of a 3% compounded COLA, a 1.5% flat rate, and take 60% of the balance as a one-time payout.
And for you, John Curtis, describe the type of pension reform you support.
The pensions are a contract that the state signed with state workers, and we need to honor that contract. State workers have put in their fair share of those pension payments for every year that they've been employed, and we need to make sure that we protect those pensions. When I think about the case that always comes to mind is the teacher I talked to who taught for 37 years. She had a master's degree, and she retired earning $39,000 a year. And there are a lot of teachers in the 93rd District and retirees in the 93rd District that were earning very meager salaries when they retired, and they need every penny of those pensions. And I can tell you that as your state representative, I will be working very hard to protect those pensions because our state workers have earned them.
Mr. Curtis, what is your plan to pay down the $7.2 billion backlog of state bills?
Well, as you know, that's a terrible problem, and a problem that only got worse when we went 2 years without a budget. I just can't tell you how much damage that did to our local economy. I am strongly in favor of a progressive income tax, and I think that that's going to be a very good way to raise the kinds of funds that we need to fund our schools, to fund some of the infrastructure that we need to do, and to start to pay down the debt. That debt payment is going to take a long time, and it's something that we need to be working on. I think it's really important to understand that Illinois is a very high tax state if you're poor or middle class. It is an extremely low tax state if you're wealthy. Illinois is a tax haven for the wealthy. And how much time do I have? 56 seconds. Okay, so let me explain real quickly. You have income taxes, of course, right? But you also have motor fuel tax. You also have fees and licenses and so on. If I earn $500,000 a year, and my friend, well, let's make me the $50,000 a year, and then there's somebody that earns $500,000 a year. Both of us pay the same amount on those fees, right? Those are regressive taxation. And the way that you make up for that difference in taxation is by having a higher income tax for the very wealthy. Okay, 15 seconds. And I will talk a little bit more about that later.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Same for you, Ms. Hammond.
So the most effective way of addressing that in an efficient manner is to set aside a certain amount of money annually in the budget that is directed strictly to pay down old bills. We have done this a number of years, particularly when in 2011 when we went through a budget line by line, and at that time we set aside money to pay down old bills. Now, if you do that and you do it effectively, you can pay off even more in your Medicaid line and combine that with the dollars from the federal government that help to also pay that down, so you really get a better bang for your buck. And you know, when we first started this time without a budget, at that time we had a budget of backlog of $16 billion. By effectively using the dollars to pay down the debt, we were able to get that down to $7 billion by being very careful how we did it and what bills we were able to pay down quicker.
Thank you.
The next question is the last one under the state finances category. And Mrs. Hammond, it goes to you first. How would you address the recently approved 32% income tax increase?
How would I address it?
That's good.
So if we go back a few years when the tax increase was first put into place, and then allowed to expire, part of the problem was the fact that it was not phased out. There were many that discussed how we would phase that out and still be able to manage our budget and manage our mandatory payments. And when I say mandatory payments, I'm talking education, I'm talking Medicaid, all of these issues that group health insurance, pensions, all on down the line. And had it been phased out, it would have been more manageable. Because it wasn't, and it was basically a drop-dead tax increase, then we got into the spiral of the court stepping in and saying, you have to pay this, 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 and this, and oh, by the way, you have to pay it at the old tax rate. So we got into the situation that we are in today with the backlog of bills. So I believe that what we can look at doing is, I certainly don't support a progressive income tax by any stretch of the imagination. I believe that we can work together collectively, and we can work on phasing out this tax increase.
Thank you, Mrs. Hammond. And Mr. Curtis, same question to you.
Before I start, could I just speak to the young people in the audience? We are almost done with tax talk. So we're going to move into some more interesting questions, I think, in a minute. That 32% tax increase was imposed on a lot of people that were really hurt by it. There are a lot of people who are living on the edge, who can barely pay their property taxes, which are extremely high. And it's to impose a tax increase on everybody across the board when the people that are already struggling are on the verge of being in real trouble, I think is something that we just can't do anymore. Again, this is why we need to have a progressive income tax. If you think about the states where people are leaving Illinois to go, Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and 41 states all told, they all have progressive income taxes. Our federal taxes are progressive. The progressive income tax is fair. The flat tax that we have in Illinois is unfair. Let me give you some quick figures. Look, if the bottom 20% in terms of income of Illinois residents pay 13% of their annual salary in taxes, not just their income tax, but all of the other taxes, 13%, bottom 20%. The middle 20% pay about 10% of their overall income. This is in Illinois, and these are figures from the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, which is a bipartisan, nonpartisan group, right? The top 1% pays 4.6% of their income in taxes. This is unfair. The super wealthy don't need any more help from state government. We need to tax them and relieve the taxes on lower income folks.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to jobs and the economy. I don't know if that gets better for the young people or not. If they're looking for jobs, maybe it does, but those are topics that are very important to this area. And we'll start, Robert Conley, you start the questioning.
For you, John Curtis, what role should the government play in business creation?
Well, the thing that I hear from small business owners is they wish that dealing with the government was easy. They wish that there was less bureaucracy. They wish that it was, that when they had to deal with Illinois state government, that things got done like that. And that's something that I'm going to work very hard to do. So the first thing that Illinois government needs to do is make sure that they are not causing more problems. You know, when it comes to small businesses and family-owned businesses, I think it's very important that we place a premium on locally owned businesses. The Amazons, the Walmarts do not need help. In fact, I think that there should be a two-tier system where family and locally owned businesses get certain maybe tax credits, and we charge a little bit more to the Amazons, the Apples of the world. I mean, I think that just makes a lot of sense. Certainly, you know, right now, Amazon is not paying any local sales tax, right? Amazon can figure it out, folks. Right? We know that Amazon can figure that out if we impose that on them, and that's something that we absolutely need to do. So, you know, what I intend to do as your state representative is to work with small business owners, but especially mayors, especially city councils and county boards, and figure out ways to encourage small businesses and to help downtowns develop and places that will encourage more small business.
And the same question to you, Noreen Hammond, which is, what role should the government play in business creation?
Sure. Thank you, Robert. Thanks for the question. I think first and foremost, the very best thing that we as the state legislature can do is to get the heck out of the way. When I talk with business persons throughout the district and throughout the state, and frankly, throughout the United States, the best thing that we can do is get out of the way. Particularly here in Illinois, we have some of the highest rates when it comes to workers' compensation. Absolutely the highest rates, and certainly the states that surround us. That's the reason we're losing a lot of jobs, is because of our workers' compensation rates. And we have no causation. We have no causation in the state of Illinois. That's ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. You're working on your roof on a Sunday afternoon, and you take a fall and you're able to make your way into work on Monday, and now you say that you have a work-related injury. And that's okay. You don't have to prove that it didn't happen at work. It is absolutely absurd. The second thing that we can do is to do a better job of streamlining our regulatory process. So what can take 30 days in the state of Iowa to be licensed in a business can take as much as 400 in the state of Illinois. So the best thing that we can do is streamline our regulations and do something about our workers' compensation rates, and also follow suit with what's going on in Galesburg with the great jobs that they are out there putting out.
Ms. Hammond, my question is to you. What will you do to grow livable wage jobs in your district?
So again, I'm going to go back to Galesburg because I think that this is certainly a great example of what I've been seeing lately, and I was talking with the mayor earlier today. I was with my colleague Dan Swanson. We were at Galesburg Metal Welding Products, and they are absolutely clamoring for people to work in their business. I was at Jupiter for their open house just a few weeks ago, and they are just hungry for people to come and to work at very, very good wages. And so I think that what we can do is certainly invest in our technology, in our vocational classes. As we did this year, in our budget, we have put money into Illinois Central College and an apprentice program there. And I think that as we move forward and we invest in our vocational and our technical jobs, those are great jobs that people can make a very good living at.
Thank you. Mr. Curtis, what will you do to grow livable wage jobs in your district?
Well, I'm gonna agree with Representative Hammond that education is a major part of this. I've talked to a couple factory owners, and they are expanding, and they're really worried about finding qualified individuals. And the best thing we can do is make sure that our young people are getting the kind of education that they need so that they can move up and get good paying jobs. And I know that the community colleges like Carl Sandburg are doing a great job in prepping students for nursing, for diesel mechanic work, and that sort of thing. And so that's really important. I also think that we need to start getting these things into our high schools. I hear a lot of people talk about high school graduates coming out and not being able to work or not being ready to work. 40 years ago, 65% of the people that graduated from high school grew up on a farm, and they knew how to work, right? That's just not true anymore like it was. And unfortunately, I think that's a real loss for this area, actually. So I think we need to give young people an opportunity while they're still in high school to job shadow and so on. I think it's very important that we raise the minimum wage. Very important. As a small business owner, when I think about raising it to $15 an hour, that makes me gasp. I mean, that would be a lot, but we can certainly raise it to a better level and then start moving it up. I think about the woman named Mary who I met in Galesburg who works at Steak and Shake. I went up to her house and her garage roof was collapsing. And I was talking to her and she says that she worked at Steak and Shake for $5 an hour plus tips. $5 an hour plus tips. How is she ever going to fix her roof? There's no way.
Thank you.
Before Rebecca asks the next question, I'm just going to say there seems to be some not knowing whether you're supposed to clap or not supposed to clap. Let's just not clap altogether. And at the end, you're going to get 30 minutes to come up and tell your candidate how good a job they did. And I did hear somebody blurt something out during one of the candidates' responses. So please don't do that. Let's be respectful to the candidates. Save your applause till the end, okay? All right, Rebecca, I'll turn it back over to you.
I'm really curious to hear your answers to this next one because we've had some of this energy development in Galesburg. And to Mr. Curtis, it's to you first. What is your view on the development of renewable energy in the 93rd District?
I'm all for it. goodness, I just think that renewable energy holds a lot of promise for this area. I know that in our county, one of our local school districts has a wind farm coming in, and when they, the kind of revenue that it's going to bring to our county and to that school district is just, I think it's just spectacular. And every year solar gets more and more affordable, and I think what I really feel like we need to be doing is investing in those technologies and educating our youth to work on wind farms and to work with solar technology. There's just no doubt that those are going to play an increasing part of our economy, and the Midwest is a great place to grow those jobs, and I think I really hope that we see a lot more.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis, and Mrs. Hammond, to you.
So in December, I had an opportunity. I was asked to represent the state of Illinois with some of my colleagues from across the aisle and the same side of the aisle, and to make a trip to Germany and look at their energy policies. I'm not going to go off that cliff and say that they've got it all right, because they have a long way to go. But they have made great strides in their energy policies, and I think that there is a lot that we in the United States, certainly in the state of Illinois, can take from that. God bless you. And so I think that we can take ideas certainly from other countries, but make them our own. I am, as a matter of fact, tomorrow I will be at a ribbon cutting for a solar farm, if you will, a mini farm associated with one of our schools. And this is not something that is just unique. It is a discussion that is ongoing with a number of our schools as a way for them to get a better bang for their buck when it comes to their energy costs. And I think that it's going to go a long way, and I think that particularly with solar, they've also added one other element to it that I think is pretty exciting, and along under the panels there, they have done plantings to attract pollinators, so they've taken it a step further.
Thank you, Mrs. Hammond.
And for you, Noreen Hammond, should Illinois raise the minimum wage?
So one of the things that we were able to do in this budget that was passed this year was to add a 50% wage increase for our caregivers for those with disabilities. I believe that those people work very hard, and certainly the service that they provide, I don't think that we can put a price on that. So should we raise the minimum wage? My question goes back to, if you raise it to $15, then what do you do about the person that's making $15 now, or $16, or $17, or $18, and upwards from that? So what you enter into is a trickle up. And so it isn't just about raising the minimum wage to $15. It's about looking at the entire picture and studying how you are going to address inequities across the board. Because you can't say, I'm going to pay everybody $15, and someone's been working in that position for 10 years or 15 years, and they're making $15 or $19 an hour. They're going to expect to be compensated as well. So it's a formula, and it needs to be figured out.
And I believe you might have already addressed this, John Curtis, but should Illinois raise the minimum wage?
Well, I'm not going to dodge the question. The answer is yes. We need to raise the minimum wage. Now, whether we raise it to raising it straight to $15 an hour is going to be very hard for many of our small businesses. I certainly think that the Walmarts and the Amazons should have a $15 an hour minimum wage. There's just no doubt about it. These people are taking their profits, they're leaving the state. You know, Amazon and Walmart are traded in Dubai and London, and they're owned by people all over the world. Absolutely, they should have a $15 an hour minimum wage. Absolutely. We can't do that to our local small businesses yet. Okay, we have to grow the economy, and we need to raise the minimum wage, but we're going to have to work with our own small businesses and make sure that we don't impose too much of a burden on them, because we need them. We need them in this area. So the answer is yes.
Okay, the next portion of questions are going to be about education. Robert Wolford, you're a Carl Sandburg College student. Why don't you start off the questioning?
All right, Ms. Curtis, the question is to you first. Assess the current state of school funding.
So we have a disastrous funding formula right now. Under the Illinois Constitution, Illinois is supposed to supply at least 50% of the funding for our schools. And at the rate that they are funding it, we would not be able to have any kind of education at all. So what happens is that most of the education funding comes from our local tax base, which means property taxes. That's why our property taxes are so high, especially in rural areas. And as we lose people in our rural areas, and as our small towns shrink, that puts more pressure on our property tax, our property owners to fund our schools, and it's a disastrous setup. We need to find a way for Illinois to pay the share that they are supposed to pay according to our state constitution. And I've been a classroom teacher. My first year teaching was in a town called Beardstown. I had 26 students. I had no books, no materials, no computer, and they gave me $60 for materials for the year. 60 bucks, no materials. Welcome to teaching, John Curtis, right? That's going on all over. And I bought $60 worth of black markers to use on my whiteboard. And that's where the curriculum was, and that's where I was teaching every day. And I opened that school at 6 a.m. I was the first one in, and I was usually the last one to leave, because the students deserve a lot better, and all of the students in the 93rd District deserve a lot better than they're getting right now. We have to do better with funding education.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. To you, Ms. Hammond, assess the current state of school funding.
And I will say that there is a new funding formula that has been put in place. This is the second year for this funding formula. I believe that it is a very successful funding formula. It is one that was worked on in a bipartisan, bicameral manner for about 4 years. Folks from both sides of the aisle, both chambers worked diligently on this. And it was not an easy task, because the previous formula that we had for funding our schools was totally inappropriate. This funding formula this year, again, we added another $350 million as we did last year. The way the formula is set up to work, that will be the case for years to come. Now, just as an example, here in Galesburg, the Galesburg School District received an additional $943,000 this year, new money under this formula. The feedback that I am getting from faculty and administrators and students is thank you, because it's working, and I think that as we move forward, we are going to find that it is very successful. And in addition to that, we put an additional $50 million into early childhood programs, desperately needed.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hammond, this next question is going to you first. What can the state do to keep more students attending Illinois colleges?
Great question. I am one of 12 members of the higher ed work group. It was started independently, led by Senator Pat McGuire, a Democrat from the Joliet area. There are 6 senators, 3 Republican, 3 Democrat, 6 representatives, 3 Republican, 3 Democrat. Greatest group I have been a part of since my time in the General Assembly. We meet on a regular basis to work on issues related to higher education. We were very successful this year with a number of the pieces of legislation that were passed. And we did it as a result not of talking just to administrators and faculty in our universities and community colleges, but we talked to people across the country and said, here's the situation in the state of Illinois. How can we do better? One of the things that we have done is a 4-year MAP program. We heard this from a lot of our financial aid advisors that there had to be stability in our MAP program. So now a student in Illinois that applies, does their FAFSA, I saw the signs coming in, every year, they will know that if they are awarded X number of dollars as a freshman and nothing changes for in their income for 4 years, they will receive that same amount of money as a senior. Even bigger than that is a program we put in for only Illinois students called Aim High. It's a $25 million program from the state with a match from our public universities. And if the student needs X number of dollars, they can apply for that matching program through their university.
Thank you, Mrs. Hammond. And Mr. Curtis?
So my home, Macomb, and our region has been devastated by the lack of funding for higher education. And as bad as the funding formula was, since 2010, we've seen a 23% decline in funding for higher education. At least that's at WIU. That's unacceptable, and that's the time that Representative Hammond has been on the Higher Education Committee. The 2 years without a budget was absolutely devastating to our community colleges, and it was devastating to our local economies, and of course Western Illinois University, where I come from. I taught at Carl Sandburg College. I taught adult education in one of their branch campuses in Bushnell. And I had a student named Rainey who was from a small town called Bardolph. And while I was there, I subbed for someone who was out sick for about 10 weeks. She came in, I helped her get her GED, she graduated, and I just ran into her at our local Hy-Vee in Macomb. And she was a cashier, and she had just bought her first house, and she was so proud. That GED program no longer exists. It has been cut because of the lack of funding for higher education in our area. The way that we fund education and the way that we keep our students in the area is to fund higher education. College has become so expensive, right? It's just absolutely out of reach for many students. We need to fund our MAP grants, and we need to be really funding it. We're not talking $25 million in a state this size. That's not serious money, folks. We need to actually fund our state universities and our community colleges, and we do that.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis.
What would you do to increase support for community colleges throughout Illinois? Would this include increasing financial support? John Curtis?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question one more time?
What would you do to increase support for community colleges throughout Illinois? Would this include increasing financial support?
So, community colleges are really essential throughout Illinois. We have a great community college system, and we need to make sure that the state is paying the third that they promised to pay. One of the reasons that they've had to cut back on so much of the programming is because Illinois has not paid the amount that they are supposed to pay each year. I think funding is the best way we can support our community colleges, and I'm just going to fight very hard to make sure that we have that support.
And then for you, Noreen Hammond, what would you do to increase support for community colleges throughout Illinois, and would this include increasing financial support?
And I believe as we look at a budget for higher education, currently our higher ed working group, we have embarked on looking at a funding formula for all of higher education, not just our 4 years, but also for our community colleges. Is it going to be ready tomorrow to enroll? No. Is it going to be ready in May? Probably not. If it took 4 years for the K through 12 program, I suspect that we are looking at least a 2-year deep down in study on how we fund higher education and how we do it with a funding formula that is fair and equitable across the state. So we're not, we have a couple of land-grant universities, in case you haven't heard, in the state of Illinois. So it's not that they would get preference over a community college or one of our more regional 4-year institutions. So I believe that as we move forward, we can come up with a fair way of funding education that includes our community colleges and gives them the money that they need to educate, quite frankly, the bulk of our students, because our community colleges are doing a yeoman's job at doing that, and we have to do a better job of helping them.
The last question here in the education issue comes to you, Ms. Hammond. What would you do to improve career and technical education opportunities at community colleges?
So I think that the first thing that we need to recognize is the fact that those are expensive programs. And when community colleges start to look at how they can save money, that's their immediate look, is what's our most expensive programs. And so thus go the career and technical. But I see more and more of our youth that's their interest. That's where they want to be at some level. And so I think that if we can give our community colleges and our high schools more of an opportunity to advance their career and technical programs, that we are going to have more individuals that are ready for the workforce and employable with jobs that will provide them with a very good living.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. Question to you, Mr. Curtis. What would you do to improve career and technical education opportunities at community colleges?
Well, we need to make sure that we support them financially, number one. And it's absolutely essential that we keep the tuition rates low for students. One of the things that I think we need to be looking at in terms of funding is figuring out a public-private partnership with some of these companies that are looking to expand and that are looking for a workforce. If in my area, the Bushnell Hammer Factory is expanding, they just bought another company and they're expanding a full wing, but they're really worried about finding the people with the technical skills and the work ethic to fill those jobs. Certainly, Carl Sandburg, which covers that area, could work with them to help develop a program that would help those students learn those skills as part of their education, and then move right into a job, maybe with AutoCAD or whatever. And I think that some of those companies would be happy to help fund, but they'd certainly be helpful in designing those programs. And that's the kind of creative thinking that we need if we're going to have if we're going to be able to move our kids into the good and high-paying jobs of the future.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we are moving pretty quickly here. We may get to go home early. We have the last round of questions, and this is a variety of political issues. And Rebecca Sismarski will start it off.
This one is to Mr. Curtis. What is your opinion of House Speaker Mike Madigan's leadership?
You know, I've been working very hard over the last months and really years to get to know the people of the 93rd District. And I'm very dedicated to the people, the men and women and the kids that I've met. Our area has a lot of, you know, we're struggling in a lot of areas. There are a lot of areas where houses are empty, where our schools are underfunded, and so on. I don't know Mike Madigan, and I'm going to be working with whoever is going to help me to help the people of the 93rd District. And whether that's Governor Bruce Rauner if he wins, if it's Governor Pritzker, if it's Mike Madigan, or if it's Minority Leader Durkin, I'm going to be working with Republicans and Democrats to help the people of this area. And, yeah, and that's what I'm about to do.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis.
And for you, Noreen Hammond, what is your opinion of Governor Rauner's leadership?
I think that if we go back to the previous question, Governor Rauner, I believe, came into his term as governor, this term as governor, hoping to make some significant improvements and changes the way the state of Illinois is run. But when you see firsthand how the Illinois House Speaker runs the state of Illinois, and he doesn't just run the Illinois House, he runs the entire state of Illinois. Nothing happens in Springfield or the city of Chicago unless it has his blessing. Make no mistake. So the governor was pretty much stymied on a lot of issues as we tried to work with the speaker. One of the things, going back to the workers' compensation, the governor asked the speaker, you know, if we try to move things forward in the state of Illinois, one of the things I'm going to ask you for is help on our workers' compensation rates. And the answer was flat out no. And that's because the Illinois trial lawyers are the entity that handles the workers' comp court cases, and they are tied at the hip to the speaker. So it's been a real challenge for the governor. I think he's done the very best job that he could.
My question would be to you, Mr. Curtis. What would you change the redistricting process in Illinois? How would you change the redistricting process in Illinois?
I think it's clear that we need to have third-party districting. I don't think that parties, or I don't think, I don't think that politicians should be choosing their voters. Voters should be choosing their representatives. And I think we need to follow states like Nebraska that have an independent group that draws districts. I think they need to be geographically literate, you know, and they just need to make sense. And I know that there are many people that are against that, but it's something that I strongly believe in.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. You, Ms. Hammond, how would you change the redistricting process in Illinois?
So we had an opportunity to have a referendum on the ballot to change the redistricting in the state of Illinois. That was not allowed to go through because of none other than Speaker Madigan. The way redistricting is done in the state of Illinois is nothing short of absurd. Just to give you an example, Senator Tracy, then Representative Tracy, and I were colleagues in adjoining districts. The last redistricting came along. The district was totally flipped. So Jill had the southern part, I had the northern part, now I've got the eastern part, and Representative Freeze has the western part. It's absolutely absurd, and they went so far as to even change the numbers. So, oh, by the way, the stationery, the envelopes, the business cards, none of that's any good anymore, so you've got to replace all that. There's this incredible thing out there called computer software. You put it in a computer, they do it in Iowa. You put it in a computer, it draws the districts fairly, taking into consideration all of the iterations that need to be taken into consideration, because that's part of the computer program you put in there. And you get fair districts. So I think that that's what we need to do in the state of Illinois, and I hope it's coming shortly, not soon enough.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hammond, what is your stance on gun control?
I am a strong advocate for Second Amendment rights. I am not a hunter by any means, any stretch of the imagination. My husband has been, not so much any longer. I am an avid trap shooter, albeit if I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm not very good. I have some lucky shots, but I'm not very good. So many of my colleagues from, particularly from Cook County, that are constantly promoting more and more gun control. And I have frank and honest discussions with my friends, and I call them my friends from that represent the city. And I tell them flat out, you know, you have some of the strictest gun laws in the country, and yet you can't get a hold of your crime rate. So my constituents that are proponents of our Second Amendment rights, I am happy to find you 12 of them that are more than willing to come up to the city of Chicago and sit on a jury, and the person that has committed the gun crime not once, twice, 3 times, but 8 times, and keeps getting their wrist slapped, they'll be happy to put them under the law.
Thank you, Mrs. Hammond. And Mr. Curtis, same question to you.
You know, I'm somebody who grew up hunting. My grandfather used to give us guns for Christmas. I'm glad that the election is November 6th, because I'll have time to gun hunt with my dad in the fall. Venison is the main meat that we eat at our house. That's deer meat, for those of you that don't know. And so I support the Second Amendment. I'm an outdoorsman. I'm a hunter. I think everyone in this room would agree that certain people should not have access to guns. And you know, I'm going to be somebody that's going to be working very closely with our law enforcement, people who are on the front lines dealing with armed people and armed conflict. I'm going to work very closely with them to make sure that any laws that are written make sense. I think it's important if you come from Galesburg or a city to remember that places like Fulton County, where I recently had a conversation with the sheriff, they're huge places and they're very underfunded. So in Fulton County, Avon is way up at the top, and if there are only 2 deputies on duty at any time. If they get a call from Astoria, it's going to take them 40 minutes with their lights on to get there. And a lot of people, and you know, a lot of these small communities have a lot of issues, and they have some scary elements and people that they worry about. They worry about their neighbors. Those people feel like they need to have guns to protect themselves. And I think when you live in a city where you have police help, you know, that quickly, you forget what it might be like for somebody who's living in a very rural area like the areas that I'm going to be representing.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis.
A large portion of the 93rd district is rural. What would you do to facilitate opportunities for rural citizens, specifically farmers? And that goes to you first, John Curtis.
Okay. Well, one of the issues that I hear all the time, especially in the small towns and very rural areas, is about roads and failing infrastructure. I talk to a lot of men who own and operate their own trucks and are truckers. And after they get done complaining about the new electronic logs that they have to deal with, which is a federal issue, they talk about the quality of the roads. And if you're making your living from driving your own truck and you're putting hundreds of thousands of miles on your vehicle each year, those potholes really add up, and it really beats up your equipment, and it costs you a lot of money. And honestly, a lot of those guys also talk about the quality of our bridges. When you're going over some of these bridges fully loaded, it's scary for some of these people. And so infrastructure is a really important issue. Poverty. If you have, I invite any of you to come and knock on doors with me in some of these communities. The level of poverty is staggering. In the town right next to mine, right next to Macomb, called Colchester, over 50% of those students are getting free lunches. 30% of them take home a backpack full of food. And I talked to a local nurse who works very closely with that group and makes sure that the kids have food when they go home on the weekend. And she says that she knows of 5 or 6 of them that make sure that they eat all of that food before they get home, because they know that their parents will take it from them and eat it when they get home. This is going on in communities all over the 93rd district, and it's just unacceptable. We have to do better, people. We have to.
And I'll repeat the question, Noreen Hammond. A large portion of the 93rd district is rural. What would you do to facilitate opportunities for rural citizens, specifically farmers?
So I have consistently been endorsed by the Illinois Farm Bureau and awarded their Friend of Agriculture Award because I work very closely with our agriculture friends, and certainly I think one of the biggest things that we can do for our rural areas is when it comes to broadband. You know, it's no secret. You all probably have some issues with dead areas with your cell phones, and that's one of the things that's crucial in the agriculture industry is the accessibility to broadband. And we have worked very closely with a lot of our independent rural power co-ops and telephone co-ops to get more of an opportunity out there to those involved in agriculture, and it's been helpful. Also, we have put into state statute that during the harvest season there is a period of time that we have increased the weight limits for our farmers when they're taking their crops to their goods to the river or to the elevators. And so those are certainly a couple of ways that we can help agriculture, but I think the third and most important part of it goes back to get the heck out of their way. You know, when you see the folks out working in the field, they are focused. They are feeding the world, and so the best thing that we can do is get out of their way.
Our last question tonight is going to come to you first, Ms. Hammond. In 2017, 33,700 residents left the state of Illinois. What would you do in your role as District 93rd representative to curb this problem?
So I think that we, and not just as a legislature, but certainly as residents of the state of Illinois, we need to have a positive attitude about the state of Illinois. Nothing has changed ever with the geography of the state of Illinois. We have everything to offer as far as infrastructure with our rail systems, our lock and dams, which we're going to get a little bit done on them, thankfully, and our system of highways. And so we have everything to offer. But if we are constantly tearing down the state of Illinois, who's that impressing? Not the person that is looking on to bring a business here or to move their family here. But in fact, I meet more and more people that say, I'm new to Illinois, or I'm back to Illinois. And the first thing that I say to them is thank you. We will take all of the folks that we can get, and I think that as we, as a state, as residents, the very best thing that we can do is offer up a positive attitude. And I'll use Eastern Illinois University and the community of Charleston as an example. They have increased their enrollment by 7%, and they did that because of the positive attitude of the Charleston community. They got behind Eastern Illinois University, they got the administration, the faculty, and the students, and they are shining because of it. And so I think that the more we do ourselves to put that image forward, the better off we'll be.
Thank you. And Mr. Curtis, same question comes to you.
Nobody has torn down the state of Illinois more than Bruce Rauner. That guy, everywhere he goes, he complains about Illinois. He spent the last 3.5 years talking badly about the state of Illinois. How many of you even know that this is the state's bicentennial? Yeah. Right? I mean, this should be a time of pride, but we have a governor who talks badly about Illinois all the time. Can you imagine? The governor of Illinois complaining about Illinois, and he has been doing it nonstop. If we want people to stay in Illinois, we need to have a quality education, K through 12, throughout the state. We need to have affordable community and four-year college programs. And we need to have an urgency to start tackling the big problems in big ways that we have in Illinois. And one of those problems is an unfair tax burden on working people in this state. Noreen Hammond voted for a 37% increase in our taxes, and that hit everybody in this room. That any tax increases, any further increase in funding for our state should be coming from the people who are paying the least, and those are the very wealthy. And those are the people that Representative Hammond will always defend.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at the end of our questions. And we're a little bit early, but we're going to finish with some closing statements. Each of you will have 2 minutes, and we'll start with Mr. Curtis.
Well, I want to thank you all again for hosting this event and the invitation to speak. These events are so important for our democracy. You know, the old way of being a state representative just isn't good enough anymore. It isn't good enough to show up for parades, for ribbon cuttings, and photo ops. It isn't good enough to be listed on special subcommittees and to spend one's time hanging out in Springfield. It isn't good enough to only be comfortable working with people who are in your party or share your partisan beliefs. It isn't good enough to continue to re-elect career politicians. We need a sense of urgency in Illinois. Our area is losing people and businesses, and our communities are struggling. There's a lot of important work to do, and we need someone with energy and hustle who can bring people together to solve these problems. These are problems that we all face. We need to take them on together. I'm asking for your vote and a chance to show you what I can do. Give me that chance, and I'll be a part of the change that we so desperately need in Springfield, in West Central Illinois, in Knox County, and in Galesburg. Thanks so much.
Noreen Hammond, your closing statement.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you all for taking the time out of your evening to be here tonight. I know that you probably had other things that you could have done, but the fact that you chose to be here. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and I will just say that I am honored to have received the support of organizations and individuals from across the state of Illinois, and certainly from the residents of the 93rd District. I have been awarded the Illinois Healthcare Association Voice of Senior Care, the Illinois Chamber of Commerce Champion of Free Enterprise, the Illinois Farm Bureau Friend of Agriculture. I've been endorsed by the Illinois Education Association, the Illinois Retired Teachers Association, the School Alliance Association, Township Officials of Illinois, the Fraternal Order of Police, the Associated Firefighters, the Illinois State Medical Society, Illinois Right to Life, the Illinois Municipal League, the Associated Builders and Contractors, the Illinois State Rifle Association, the National Rifle Association, Illinois Farm Bureau, and ABATE. And I'm very honored to have all of those endorsements and take that very seriously, and I appreciate your vote in November. Thank you.
Okay, now is the time to applaud the candidates.